Good morning. Randy, Jan, and I would like to thank you for joining us today and being a client of TrustPoint. We understand that every day we are getting new information regarding COVID-19, and all aspects of our lives and daily routine are being impacted. I'm Christine Schmidt, one of the certified financial planners located in our Minneapolis office. We hope your families are staying safe and healthy, and understand this is an emotional impact of social distancing with family, friends, and colleagues that we all are experiencing. Today, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about planning and to share some healthy responses for keeping your goals on track when changes in your life affect your financial situation. First, it's important to connect with others. Take time to connect with family and friends. While meeting in person is not an option for most of us, consider making a phone call, sending an email, or use a free video service to chat with those who mean the most. It's important to take care of yourself and maintain connections. Focus on the positive things in your life and write them down and share them with others. My family has a gratitude jar with slips of paper where we write one thing once a day that we're grateful for. On days where we are stuck, we draw from the jar and read one of the past items. Consider your talents. Make time for things you enjoy. Play an instrument, sing, dance, play games, sew, build, exercise, and create. Often these are the things we don't spend time on, and we are too busy with other commitments. So do something that gets you moving and changes your perspective. Next, go back and review your financial plan. Many of you have experienced working with us to develop your financial plan. First step in preparing your financial plan is gathering information about you personally and identifying your goals. This is true each time we revisit a financial plan, and it's important to know your priorities to ensure you will stick with your plan. When life events happen, such as a change in employment or a reduction in income from your portfolio, it is good to review your plan. For those of you who have not gone through the planning process, I encourage you to start simply by developing a budget. When budgeting, consider your money values. Consider your needs, wants, and wishes. Prioritize your expenses in those categories so you can consider what to reduce if your income changes. Use those categories to make a budget. If you don't already have a budget, there are several apps you can download for free to track your expenses against your income. If you go to the TrustPoint website and search Ultimate Money Saving Guide, we have a tool there as well that you could use. Some of the apps that I have recommended to clients in the past is Good Budget, Mint, or Clarity Money. If you like to go old school, a paper and pencil with some simple categories is a good way to start. Once established, review each item. Next, consider areas that you can control, that you can save or reduce. Items like bundling insurance, eliminating subscriptions for services you're not using. For areas of debt, mortgage and bank loans, contact your financial institutions to see if you qualify for payment deferral or suspend payments without penalty or fees. If you are contributing to your 401k, evaluate the option of reducing your contribution for a few months. Yes, retirement contributions are an important part of your retirement plan, but if the alternative is to increase credit card debt, we would suggest reducing your 401k contribution for a short window of time. Consult your tax preparer to understand the potential impact. Next, review your budget with your family. Take the opportunity to share your money values. What are things that are important and what things might you need to delay purchasing? If you're concerned about finances, whether you discuss openly with your children and your spouse or not, they are likely aware of your emotions regarding your finances, especially if you all live under the same roof. When discussing with your children, you may need to think about the level of detail based on their ages, but it's never too early to share your values around money with your family. They're likely to ask questions and may want to know how they can help. Knowledge tends to reduce fear and anxiety of the uncertain. Put these changes in motion and come back to it often to make sure you are sticking to it. Next, we'll discuss some planning options. We are learning firsthand during the pandemic that there are things in our lives we cannot control. But during our planning meetings, we talk about what you can control. Focusing on those areas of your plan can provide comfort. Working with our team to establish a personal financial plan allows you to prepare and evaluate options as your life changes. The following are a few planning opportunities for those in retirement or approaching retirement. Contributing to your IRA or Roth IRA. If you've not yet contributed to your traditional IRA or Roth IRA for the 2019 tax year, there is still time. As the tax filing deadline is extended to July 15th, so is your ability to contribute for 2019 while valuations are low. If your 2019 contribution has been made, you can also take the opportunity of low valuations to make your 2020 contributions at this time. For those subject to phase outs, there is still time to consider a backdoor Roth IRA contribution as well. Contact your TrustPoint relationship manager if any of these are opportunities for you. Roth IRA conversion. Knowing that when we come out of the current downturn, there should be a rebound in the equity markets, similar to what we've seen following other downturns. Converting a portion of your traditional IRA to a Roth IRA can be a smart move from a tax standpoint. Though you will have to pay income tax on the conversion amount, the future growth, including the rebound from these lows, will all be in a tax-free vehicle, a Roth IRA. This is even more important now with the passage of the Secure Act. Now, when your heirs, generally anyone other than your spouse, inherit retirement accounts, including IRAs, they have to distribute the account over a 10-year period, as opposed to under the previous law, over their life expectancy. Distributions from inherited Roth IRAs are tax-free for the recipient. Conversely, distributions from inherited traditional IRAs are treated as ordinary income to the recipient. So converting a portion of your retirement account to Roth IRAs could be a really good planning tool to move tax-deferred dollars into tax-free dollars. Again, discuss this with your tax preparer to understand the potential tax impact. Next, we'll talk about options for gifting now instead of later. Budgeting can also be used as a way to evaluate personal gifting to your family. If you want to help family or friends and have been considering ways to help, you can use the example of needs, wants, and wishes. The IRS allows any individual to gift up to $15,000 to any one or more individuals each year with what's called an annual exclusion gift. If you hold individual securities that have been depressed in value, one strategy is to make a gift of those securities up to the maximum amount to your heirs. Then, when the market rebounds, you've transferred all the future growth to the recipient of that gift. Again, we don't know how long the current financial climate will last, but it's not a bad time to view this as an opportunity to explore strategies that could have a positive impact to you overall as a way to explain that it's good planning for your estate and a way to give to your family now without any tax implications, provided you stay below the annual gifting limit of $15,000 per person. For families with specific charities listed in their budget, there are some planning opportunities as well. If one of your family priorities is sharing and giving to a select charity, these planning tips are another opportunity to obtain a tax benefit and have a conversation around your family values. The CARES Act added an above-the-line deduction up to $300 for a charitable gift made by an individual direct to a charity. This includes individuals who otherwise take the standard deduction on their return now can obtain a reduction in their income tax. Next, we'll talk about the qualified charitable distribution. For those age 70 and a half and older, the CARES Act did eliminate the required minimum distribution for 2020. However, for planning purposes, it still allows the qualified charitable distributions made direct from the IRA to a qualified charity to occur up to $100,000 without inclusion in your taxes as income or a charitable deduction. For those wanting to make cash gifts to public charities and currently itemizing on their federal tax return, there's an opportunity to take a credit of up to 100% of their AGI for qualified charities in 2020. Next slide, please. The qualified charities include public charities, but excludes donor-advised funds and supporting organizations. This credit is an increase for 2020 from the 60% AGI limitation. For those charitably inclined, they can bundle this giving with securities sold at a loss and significantly reduce their income tax for 2020, as well as generate a capital loss carry-forward bucket. This bucket can be used to offset future capital gains. Please consult your tax preparer to understand the potential impact of these changes. Tax loss harvesting. While everyone's situation is different, if your portfolio has declined in value, you have the opportunity to sell assets at a loss to create a loss bucket. That can be used to offset future capital gains. It's a way to maintain the integrity of your portfolio, of your asset allocation, and your risk tolerance by taking advantage of the down market and capturing losses today to offset future gains. Most investors invest in mutual funds, which are required to pay out capital gain distributions at the end of the year. There are situations where the market has negative returns for the year, but you still receive a capital gain distribution and have to pay tax on those dollars. This strategy could prove beneficial by offsetting the losses generated against future capital gains in your investments. And the last reminder for any good plan is to review your estate plan. Take this time to read your document and make sure you notify family where to find the documents if they need to act. Review the title on your accounts and property to make sure the assets will follow your plan within your document. It's a good time to review your beneficiary elections to make sure those are still individuals or entities that you would like to receive your assets. When reviewing your power of attorney or your healthcare directive, make sure the named individuals are still able to act and informed of their role in your plan. When you have a plan to work from, it's easier to make decisions and take action. With that, I'll turn it over to Randy and Yan.
Thank you, Christine, for sharing your thoughts and guidance on proactive steps that might make sense for our listeners in light of the new laws and challenging market environment we find ourselves in. Before we move on to the market update, we thought it would make sense to talk a little bit about what we're doing in regards to portfolio management and other potential opportunistic strategies that could be the silver lining in this challenging market. We know we can't control the market, but what can we do? So here's a few silver linings that are often useful tools in down markets. First of all, Christine just shared it in her material, but tax loss harvesting is a great way to provide tax benefits by offsetting future gains. It's important to understand this is a combination of repositioning a portfolio, but still maintaining similar levels of equity exposure. And this is part of what we do on an ongoing basis when we're faced with the market environment that we have today. Rebalancing to target allocations, opportunity or threat. In bear markets, portfolio drift is common. This is when the desired asset mix is no longer maintained due to market volatility. Rebalancing back to target levels has proven to be a beneficial for long-term investors. This is also what we do on an ongoing basis. We know we need to be thoughtful, but we will rebalance portfolios with the goal of improving long-term returns. Consider legacy holdings. Investors hold highly appreciated stock for several reasons. What we're referring to here are those that are being held for tax purposes or the desire to avoid capital gains. Bear markets provide opportunities to make strategic moves that will help diversify portfolios and not rely so much on large concentrated legacy positions. Accelerate transition plans. Similar thought process to the legacy holdings. With newer clients to TrustPoint, we often develop a transition plan. The transition into our investment strategy has several considerations, but realize capital gains is an important one. Market corrections and bear markets lower potential capital gains, removing the capital gain tax concern to transition a portfolio. And then last, new investment dollars. It's often common for clients to add new dollars to portfolios. Depending on market environments, we may opportunistically accelerate the systematic dollar cost averaging into markets. We wanted to share a few of these considerations. We are proactively utilizing these strategies, but if you feel any of these should be discussed further, please contact us. For the remainder of this presentation, Yan and I will share more thoughts on the coronavirus, potential for reopening economies, and a review of markets. I'll turn it over to Yan.
Thank you, Randy. I want to start with some good news. The distancing measures are working. So I think as a community, as a country, we should be proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And as a result of that, what we're seeing today is that there are a few countries that have now passed the apex, or the high point in the number of new daily cases reported. And this is what the chart is showing here. And as a result, as in parts of Asia and Europe, we're starting to experiment with less intrusive containment measures now. So, but what's important to understand, I think, here is that a peak in the number of new daily cases is necessary, but not a sufficient condition to restart economies. And I'll get back to that in a second. On the next slide, we're showing the map of the US. And in the US, we've also started to talk about what life should look like in the weeks and months to come. Now, last week, we heard from the federal government. The federal government issued some guidelines to start opening up our economy. But as we mentioned in the past, federal guidelines are great, but at the end of the day, the state governors will have the last say. And as the chart here shows, the closing of the US economy was largely uncoordinated and at times even felt a little chaotic. And unfortunately, we believe that the reopening of our economy will likely follow a similar path. So we're going to need to be very careful here, because we don't want to turn the recent surge in COVID-19 cases into multiple waves. Ultimately, we know that there's permanent solutions that will allow us to open up our economy. And these solutions are not mutually exclusive, so they can complement each other. On the first one, and we talked about that one in the previous webinar, is herd immunity, where you have a high percentage of the population with immunity, bringing a transmission rate between people below 1. So that would be very good news, but no, we know that most experts believe that it may take up to 2 to 3 years to get there. So over a shorter time horizon, we're going to have to look at other alternatives. Vaccine, which is another solution, is a possibility. There are over 20 vaccines currently being worked on. And early indications were that it would take about a year to have one that is widely available. Now, recent reports have suggested that it may come a little earlier than this, but we'll have to see. In the meantime, I think treatments will be what we're going to have to rely upon to close the gap here. And I want to give an update on 2 treatments that we have talked about in the past that have been widely mentioned in the press. So the first one is the combo hydroxychloroquine plus Z-Pak. This combo was actually tested in France not so long ago, and unfortunately, though, did not produce the results expected. So more results are coming, more studies are on the way, but as of now, this one has been a little bit of a disappointing. On remdesivir, the second one we talked about a few weeks back, we actually got some good news last Friday, and that's one of the reasons why market was up strongly last Friday. So what we heard last Friday is that the drug is active in the disease. The results actually came from a study of 125 patients at the University of Chicago Medical Center. And that follows earlier small studies that have also demonstrated that the drug is promising. So more results are expected for this particular drug in the weeks to come, but it's important to note, however, that remdesivir is a very complex drug. So there could be some manufacturing and pricing issues here down the road. And it must also be given intravenously. So this is not the perfect drug by any means, but it could be, we believe, effective at mitigating bad outcomes in a number of patients. And we believe it could also get accelerated approval by the FDA. So in the meantime, what do? We know that there's enormous pressure on governments as we speak to reopen economies. So short of a vaccine or an effective treatment, we need to think about the conditions that will allow us to partially but progressively reopen our economies. So we listed 5 here. I'm going to go through them one by one. Number 1, a steady decline in a number of new daily cases for at least 14 days, which is the incubation period for the virus. Number 2, greater capacity, better equipped hospitals, which include also more personal protective equipment for healthcare workers on the front line. Number 3, preventive measures in workplaces and public settings. Number 4, widespread, accurate, and rapid testing kit and blood test to separate the sick from the healthy. And finally, a tracking tracing system with preemptive quarantines. So when we look at the list here, and we look at number 1, 2, and 3 on the list, we think we can get there in a matter of weeks. But for 4 and 5, it may take months. And I want to address 4 in particular because 4 has been talked a lot about in the press recently. In the US, we're currently testing about 120,000 people a day. All sorts of bottlenecks preventing us from doing more, from a lack of swabs, for example, to a lack of lab technicians. The problem is that most experts believe that we should be conducting at least 500,000 tests a day. Ideally, 1 million tests a day. So 4 to 8 times more what we're currently doing. Eventually we'll get there, but it'll take some time. And that's the bottom line here. We're gonna need to be patient. A return to normalcy will take time. We'll get there, but we'll get there in baby steps. There's still a lot of unknowns. But as the next slide shows, we're starting to get some estimates of the potential impact of COVID-19 on the world economy. What the chart shows here is that after growing at the 2.9% pace in 2019, the IMF is now projecting global economy to contract by 3% in 2020, which will obviously be worse than what we experienced in 2008, 2009. In fact, you have to go back to the Great Depression of 1929, 1933 to see similar weak numbers. And that's assuming that the pandemic subsides in the second half of 2020, allowing containment measures to be relaxed. So this is the best case scenario if there are no setbacks, no second waves of the virus, and everything goes as planned. Good news is that the rebound in 2021 should be very sharp. From a lower base, so even by the end of 2020, the IMF is expecting that the level of economic activity will still be below where they had projected before the virus. So to avoid a catastrophe, like the Great Depression, what we've seen is governments and central banks stepping in, and stepping in very, very aggressively, much more aggressively than we even saw during the 08-09 crisis. And the graph above shows what has been announced already in the last several weeks from a fiscal standpoint. And we know more is coming. One of the questions that we've been getting as of late from clients is, who will ultimately pay for all this? And it's obviously a very difficult question to answer, because if governments tighten fiscal policy later on in order to pay off the debt incurred during the pandemic, this could obviously weigh on economic growth. What we believe is a more likely scenario is that we will probably see the Federal Reserve and other central banks facilitate the financing of national deficits going forward, just like we saw during World War II. On that note, I would like to turn it over to Randy, who will be providing us an update on how markets are performing as of late and how investors should be thinking about, again, the situation we're in.
Thank you, Jan. For the remainder of our time together, I'll take a look at how fixed income and equity markets have reacted in recent weeks and months. Bond markets can be volatile too. What you're looking at is a 5-year trend line graph of global investment grade bonds. Through all the headlines surrounding the equity markets in March, it might be easy to miss the excessive volatility in the bond market as well. This can be seen on the right-hand side of the graph. After stabilizing from the anticipation of a phase 1 trade agreement with China and the Fed rate cuts in 2019, the onset of COVID-19 caused a flight to safety. As an example of this volatility, take the 10-year Treasury yield. The 10-year Treasury began the month of March yielding 1.25%, dropped to below 0.4%, the all-time low, rose back up to 1.15%, and ended the month below 0.7%. The demand for cash in March was so great, even bonds saw outflows, and most bond yields rose, which would be indicated by the quick decline on the right-hand side of the graph. Credit market sell-off caused the Federal Reserve to step in and institute several asset purchase programs to back the fixed income markets and stabilize the financial system. Regardless of the sell-off in corporate credit in March, the surprise rate cuts by the Fed and recessionary environment has left government bonds at extreme high valuations, while corporate bonds have rebounded in April and reestablished their footing. Sharp sell-off followed by the sharp rebound. So let's take a look at how the sell-off in March compares to other difficult, challenging times in the bond market. Compared to other turbulent bond markets, the March decline ranked as second most significant, second only to the financial crisis in 2008. Fortunately, bonds tend to rally much earlier and much faster than equities. In fact, more than half, about 5% of this 9.3% decline has been recovered through the first half of April. Now let's move to the equity side. Global equities saw a sell-off and a rebound as well. And what you're looking at is a global equity benchmark over the last 5 years. As you look at this graph, I think it's important to remember that the bear market began with market at all-time high, was enjoying the longest economic expansion ever, and just finished a year that equities were up nearly 28%. We know the response to the potential spread of COVID-19 has been unprecedented on many fronts. The abundance of caution and social distancing efforts has made the economic outlook uncertain, and the market has reacted to that uncertainty. The COVID-19 pandemic bear market will go down as one of the most rapid declines. In less than 4 weeks, beginning in late February, major market indices lost about a third of their value. However, maybe fitting, the rally has been equally fast. In the past 3 weeks, the global equity markets rallied 25% from the bottom, which can be seen on the right-hand side. Often in bear market rallies, we see about a 30% rebound from the total drop in the market. You can see here that it's actually rebounded about 50%, so very rapid and more than we've seen in the past. So how does this compare to other bear markets? A historical perspective on equity bear markets is listed here. The table shows the total decline of each bear market, how long the decline took, and the duration of the recovery. Although the most recent bear market always feels like the worst, you can see here currently it's about average. You see 34% decline. An average of all these listed here is a little bit over 35%. Bear markets tend to be sharp and not long in duration. As you can see from the duration column, just a couple of these bear markets were longer than 2 years. Ultimately, time will tell how long the recovery will take. From past bear markets, there has been a large variance in recovery duration, from as short as 0.2 of a year back in the early 80s to as long as the recovery was during and after the Great Depression. With that said, if the last 3 weeks are any indication, the potential for a rapid recovery is there. So this table can be pretty eye-watering on a standalone basis, so let's end on a more positive note. Equity markets go up more than they go down. This chart combines bull and bear markets since before the Great Depression. Yellow portions are bear markets, blue portions are bull markets, and the gray columns are recessionary periods. Visually, you can see bull markets in blue dominate the illustration. On average, bull markets last 6.6 years with an average accumulation return of 339%. On the right hand, you can see the most recent bull market was nearly 11 years long and 450% in return. Bear markets, however, tend to last on average 1.3 years with an average decline of 35%. Arguably, not a bad trade-off for a long-term investor. Even with these bear market returns included, equities over time have provided strong risk-adjusted returns. Okay, that concludes our webinar for today. On behalf of all of us at TrustPoint, thank you for your attention. We appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Please reach out to us at your convenience with any follow-up questions or feedback. Until next time, stay well and thank you.